Future Funnies. The day humanity brought religion to the stars, Teddy, did not mean to invent a galactic church before lunch. He only meant to show some slides, answer a few questions, and sneak a donut from the council commissary without Professor Gleepnax seeing. The donut plan was doomed from the moment the translator earpiece hiccuped and announced to a packed chamber of dignitaries that humanity's core religious practice was ritual veneration of fried circular bread. "It did not say that," Teddy whispered. "It absolutely said that," said Aira Vel, the new cultural liaison, not looking up from her slate. She had the calm, lightly amused smile of someone watching a small comet miss a city by inches. "Also, your pointer laser is on. You are aiming it directly at the arch-moderator's pet moss." Teddy killed the laser and cleared his throat. He was a freshman at Galactic University and still wore his Earth hoodie even when Star Station climate controls insisted it was spring. On the big hollow behind him, his title slide read, Religion 101, How Humans Find Meaning, MAKE Community, and Occasionally Sing. "Esteemed Council," he said, smiling in the way that made his cheeks ache, "there's been a small translation error." The council chamber, a flattened sphere lined with bioluminescent vinework and floating benches, buzzed with interest. On one tier, the gaseous froon shimmered like heat over pavement. On another, a ring of crab-like snacter clicked their mandibles and passed a bowl of spice gravel. Bloop and Zoink, two jelly-like students in borrowed choir robes for reasons unknown, waved enthusiastically from the student gallery. The arch-moderator, a long-necked being named Pexy who wore an expression that could only be described as chronically unimpressed, tilted his head. "Please clarify, human presenter Teddy. Are donuts not sacred? Donuts can be sacred," Teddy said, hands up. "But that is not the main thing. We have many religions on Earth. Different practices. Shared themes, such as," Pexy asked, pen-poised, "community. Care for others. Stories about where we come from and where we are going. Rituals that make us feel connected. Moments of silence. Occasional potlucks," the translator hummed. Pexy's pen scratched. Ira's brow furrowed and she tapped her slate. "Your potlucks," Pexy read aloud, "are communal probability offerings." A ripple of awe moved through the chamber. The froon expanded like popcorn. The snackter elder made a reverent clicking sound. "Close enough," Teddy said. Professor Gleepnax, a squid-faced academic with a coat permanently stained by chalk and calamity, leaned into his mic from the faculty bench. "I would like to register a note of caution. Last time the human delegation explained college football. Half the spiral arm declared for something called the Crimson Tide, and the other half began hoarding foam fingers. Please contain your metaphors, Mr. Teddy." "Yes, Professor." Ira stood then, tucking a pale strand of hair behind one pointed ear. Her skin carried a faint constellation of bioluminescent freckles that pulsed when she was thinking. She was Elari, a humanoid species that looked enough like humans to make Teddy's stomach do annoying cartwheels whenever she spoke. "For clarity," she said, "we should show examples of different human traditions." Without donuts, Teddy agreed and changed the slide. The hollow filled with images. People gathered in buildings with spires, people sitting cross-legged by rivers, people lighting candles, people standing quietly in storm-bent forests. He tried to speak plainly, to keep the jokes on a leash. "Some humans gather each week," Teddy said. "Some pray alone. Some meditate. Some sing. Some read. Most of us, whether or not we belong to a specific religion, look for meaning and a way to be better to each other." The translator purred. Across the chamber, Zarnie, a rival student with cheekbones sharp enough to cut gossamer and a permanent smirk, raised a hand. "Question. How do you verify that a way to be better exists? Is there a double-blind trial for kindness? A peer-reviewed paper on forgiveness?" Zarnie, Professor Gleepnax warned. "No, it's okay," Teddy said, ignoring the heat in his face. "You measure it by the communities it builds and the harm it helps avoid. Not everything meaningful is a lab result." Zarnie leaned back, unconvinced. Spoken like someone who has never run a regression chart on joy. Bloop raised a wobbly arm. We would like to register for the donut faith, please. Zoink bobbed in agreement. We are prepared to tithe sprinkles. Aira covered her smile with her fingers. Teddy tried not to look at her too long and failed. He switched to a slide labeled Common TRMS. It was a mistake. Take Mass, he said, pointing. In some traditions, Mass is a service. A gathering. It doesn't mean gravity. But in other contexts, Mass is. Well, Mass, the translator, ever helpful, chose violence. The hollow behind him split into two panels. On the left, a quiet stone-walled church with sunlight on pews. On the right, a diagram of a gravity generator bending spacetime into submission. The caption blazed, Mass, either quiet singing or turning up gravity until everyone feels very sincere murmurs. In the engineering section, someone whispered, I knew it. That is not what I said, Teddy tried. And Sabbath, he went on desperately. A day of rest. The hollow, wanting to be helpful, flashed SAB bath, a tank where SAB fish nap. It showed a school of long imaginary fish dozing in a warm bubble whirlpool, while a lifeguard blew a whistle at anyone who brought work emails. Professor Gleepnax's palm met his forehead with a wet thunk. Zarnie snorted. Aira coughed, which in Elari body language meant she was politely choosing not to laugh out loud. Teddy could feel the moment slipping like a bar of soap. He dropped the pointer. Look, my point is simple. Humans use religion to gather and encourage each other. To wrestle with big questions. To mark time. To share food. Donuts, Bloop whispered reverently. Sometimes donuts, Teddy admitted. Pexy leaned forward. Human Teddy, would you be willing to demonstrate? We have heard that humans use songs, short speeches, a quiet moment, and then they shake hands and eat things from platters. Teddy's heart did a somersault. He looked at Professor Gleepnax, who gave the universal academic gesture for you have dug this hole, kindly climb out. He looked at Aira, who tilted her head in a way that meant, if you do this, I will help. That was all it took. We can host a service, Teddy said. An intergalactic one. Tonight, Gleepnax said. Tonight, Aira echoed, as if it were an elegantly obvious solution. Her freckles brightened a tick. We will make it simple. Music. A short talk. Shared food. We will invite everyone, even me, Zarnie asked with elaborate innocence. I may have notes, especially you, Teddy said, the council murmured. Somewhere in the back, a froon squeaked and released a cloud of lemon-scented approval. Pexy wrote something down and nodded once. Very well. The council chamber is yours at second bell. Please submit a menu that does not trigger snacked or shell puffing and a song list cleared for cave atha ears. What about sermons? Asked Atil, whose larynx produced sounds like flutes. We have heard sermons are where humans pick a metaphor, ride it like a comet, and everyone leaves with 3 points and a handout. No handouts, Teddy promised. Just a story. And we can make room for silence. Silence, Pexy repeated, glancing at the agenda. How long will you require the chamber to do nothing? A minute, Teddy said. Bossy, Pexy murmured, and banged the gavel moss. They had 8 hours to invent the first intergalactic religious service in history. The scramble was instant. Gleepnax commandeered a whiteboard and began listing don'ts. No lasers during hymns, no dry ice, no references to the time Teddy accidentally baptized a lab by knocking over the water cooler. Bloop and Zoink camped in the commissary and promised to curate desserts by sampling every 12th pastry to ensure spiritual integrity. Zarnie composed a list of criticisms in advance so he would not be late to his own objections. Aira pulled Teddy into a side corridor lined with hydroponic basil and gave him a look he would one day swear glowed faintly. Be honest, she said. Are you actually ready for this? No, Teddy said. But if I say yes enough times, maybe the universe gets confused and goes along with it. So, faith, Aira said, something like that. They stood too close for a fraction too long. Aira's eyes were a shade like sea glass, and her pupils had a thin vertical sliver that widened when she smiled. She had a ridge along her brow that caught the station light, the subtle mark of an Elari matriline. Teddy considered saying something brave or smart. He said, "Do you like donuts?" She laughed. You are not subtle. But yes, the ones with lemon glaze. Noted, he said, filing it next to everything else about her they planned. Aira suggested a welcome line in multiple languages. Teddy drafted a short talk populated with soft jokes and one sincere story about his grandmother lighting a candle on a bad night, because sometimes light is not about seeing, but about reminding yourself you are not in the dark alone. Aira read it and touched his elbow. That is good, she said quietly. Keep that. They picked one song with no theological content beyond the general praise of existence, one silent minute timed with the station clocks, and a closing ritual Teddy called, for lack of better words, the sharing of something edible. On the menu, tea, coffee analogs, mineral sips, glucose beads, and because Bloop had already stolen a crate, donuts. You cannot put donuts on the flyer, Gleepnax said. You will cause a doctrinal schism before the first note. The flyer simply read, all are welcome. Bring your questions. Bring yourselves by second bell. The chamber looked different. The lights were lower. The vinework along the walls drifted like lazy constellations. Around the circular floor, beings of a dozen shapes found places. The Froon had arranged small wind chimes within their gaseous bodies and made a sound like very distant rain. The Snackter clicked softly in warm anticipation. The Cavathi wore little sound dampers over their fins. Zarnie sat in the second row with arms crossed, a smirk prepared like a dagger. Aira stepped up first. Welcome, she said, and the translator turned her Elari lilt into a light bell. We are not here to tell you what to believe. We are here to be together for a little while. To be quiet together and loud together. To think of the best we can be, and to eat afterward without arguing about the menu. If you do argue about the menu, please do so in a way that builds friendship. Polite laughter hummed. Teddy took his place, palms damp, mouth dry. Hi, he said. I'm Teddy. I am very nervous. A wave of empathy moved through the seats. Even Zarnie's smirk shifted a degree toward human. I grew up with different kinds of religion around me, Teddy said. Some of my friends went to services every week. My family went sometimes and stayed home sometimes. And sometimes we sat around the table and tried to say what we were grateful for without making jokes. I was not good at that last part, he paused. But I noticed something. When things were hard, my grandma would light a candle. She said she liked the little circle of light because it made her remember that darkness is just a place where light hasn't arrived yet. The chamber was very still. The fine moss underfoot tightened its grip on the floor like it was listening. I think religion, at its best, is a way of holding a light for each other, Teddy went on. Sometimes that light looks like a prayer. Sometimes it looks like a song. Sometimes it looks like showing up with food because someone is sad and nobody knows what to say. Sometimes it looks like forgiving someone when you could be right instead. Soft murmurs. Someone sniffed. Bloop and Zoink handed napkins to each other dramatically and then to their neighbors. We will sing one song, Teddy said. It is about the universe being very big and us being very small and choosing to be kind anyway. If you do not sing, no problem. If you do, sing wrong or loud or quiet or in a key that has not been discovered, and it will still count. He started too high, panicked, and then Aira's voice slipped in below his like a strand of silk under rough rope. The Elari harmonics gave her a subtle resonance, as if a second voice perched on the ledge of the first, peeking over. Bloop and Zoink hummed like inflatable bees. The Snackter clicked a gentle rhythm. The Froon chimed like distant glass. Teddy forgot to be afraid and sang like someone who meant it. They let the last note hang until it dissolved. Then Aira lifted a finger, and the chamber fell into an agreed silence. 1 minute. It unrolled like a ribbon, neither heavy nor awkward, just a simple human minute made big enough to hold a galaxy. Teddy thought of his grandmother's candle. He thought of Aira's freckles. He thought, for one risky second, that he might actually be falling in love at a pace that would give gravity indigestion. The minute ended with a soft chime. Aira nodded at Teddy. He closed the talk with a handful of words about being careful with each other. He thanked them for taking a chance on something they did not understand yet. He gestured to the tables along the back wall and invited everyone to the sharing of something edible. That is when it went sideways. The first warning was a snackter elder inhaling sharply and puffing his shell into a full ceremonial ruff. The second was a froon releasing a distressed cloud in the shape of an exclamation point. The third was Zarnie, who sprang up like a jack-in-the-box whose spring had been wound by spite. "Objection," Zarnie called. The menu features donuts. Bloop and Zoink froze mid-curation, a chocolate ring hovering between them like a halo that had second thoughts. Teddy glanced at the tables, where 3 platters of donuts beamed innocently. The top row glittered with sprinkles as if they were aware of their political power. "Yes," Teddy said carefully, "there are donuts. And there are mineral sips and glucose beads and tea. We have options," Zarnie pointed a dramatic finger. "You cannot call this intergalactic and then privilege a human symbol. You are forcing a pastry-based orthodoxy on a diverse assembly. I am simply offering dessert," Teddy said. "Dessert is not doctrine," the chamber erupted. The snackter elder clicked in a way that meant jurisprudence. The froon chimed in protest. A Kavathi delegate produced 3 policy papers from a pouch under his fin, all of which had the words donut and schism in the titles. Pexy sighed into his moss. Aira moved to Teddy's side. "Do not debate Zarnie on pastry ethics," she murmured. "He has trained for this moment. I can fix this," Teddy whispered back. "Maybe," he stepped forward, hands up again. "Okay. New plan." "No donuts." Bloop made a sound like a squeaky toy losing hope. Zoink clutched the chocolate ring to his chest. "Instead," Teddy said, brain firing ideas like fireworks that had been left in the rain, "we take the symbol and make it bigger. A donut is a circle. So are our seats. So are planets. So are rings of people standing around someone who is hurting so they are not alone. The whole reminds us that not having all the answers does not mean we have nothing." The chamber quieted incrementally. Even Zarnie paused, either considering or composing a new insult with more torque. "We will remove the donuts from the table," Teddy said, nodding to Bloop and Zoink, who sagged but complied. "We will replace them with a ring of cups. Tea, beads, sips. If you take a cup, you are in the circle. If you do not, you are still in the circle, because there is always more circle than we think. Nobody has to eat anything to belong. That is not how circles work," Zarnie muttered, but it lacked bite. Aira raised her hand. "I propose a small ritual of thanks for every bite, regardless of what is bitten," she said. One sentence. Not to a deity or doctrine unless someone wishes it, but to the hands that prepared it, the systems that grew it, and the luck that we are here at all to taste anything. The froon chimed high and sweet. The snackter elder folded his ruff. Pexy scribbled a note and underlined it twice. Zarnie sank into his seat, not conceding defeat exactly, but choosing to live to complain another day. They formed lines. They took cups. Bloop and Zoink guarded the donuts with the seriousness of museum docents during a school tour. The sharing of something edible proceeded with minimal theological fallout. The Kavathi found they liked the tea. The froon discovered that glucose beads made their chimes sound in the key of C for exactly 19 seconds. The snackter decided that being grateful made their shells less itchy. The till wrote a stanza about circles that made Pexy sniff privately when he thought nobody was looking. "That was not disaster," Aira said to Teddy when the lines thinned and the low hum of post-service conversation filled the air. "That was almost grace," Teddy exhaled. "I thought we were going to get excommunicated from the galaxy by pastry." Aira's smile tilted. "You keep choosing the gentle thing when the sharper thing is available. It is very human. It is also very brave. Is it brave if I still want to hide under a table? It still counts." She bumped his shoulder with hers, a small contact that felt like a whole weather system moving in. Gleepnax shuffled over, his coat speckled with powdered sugar that must, legally speaking, have been airborne. Well, that was not the worst cross-cultural ceremony this station has seen. I was once at a Kavathi graduation where the valedictorian gave a speech entirely in whale anatomy and nobody noticed for an hour. He adjusted his spectacles and peered at them. Also, are you two on a date? Because if this is how you plan to spend study hall, I will need to schedule a test of some kind to punish the universe for its optimism. We are working, Aira said, cheeks warming. Her freckles brightened like distant buoys. Teddy stared intently at his tea. Good. Continue. Try not to found any religions by accident. He had said it to tease them. The universe, sneaky as ever, took it as instruction. Word spread. The service had been quiet and curious, and, for reasons nobody could properly describe, peaceful. The station gossip networks flared. A photo of Bloop and Zoink guarding the donut platters went viral. The phrase, "nobody has to eat anything to belong," was spray-chalked in 3 languages near the tram stop. Someone started calling the gathering the New Intergalactic Church, half joking, and someone else printed a flyer. And by morning, there was a line at the council office with beings politely asking when the next one would be. Every week? Pexi groaned, scanning the requests. There is no slot for gentle circle talk and optional snacks in the chamber calendar. Make one, Gleepnax suggested. Who leads this church? Asked the till, earnest flutes fluttering. The question hung there like a magnetic key in a field. Teddy felt every eye on him. He looked at Aira. She lifted her chin almost imperceptibly and shook her head just once, as if to say, not because you want it, but because you are being asked. He wanted to run. He wanted to go back to his room and put a hoodie over his face and sleep for a week and wake to find that the universe had assigned someone else to organize the line for the tea urns. He also wanted, inconveniently, to say yes. Not a leader, Teddy said slowly. A convener. A host. A keeper of the circle. Someone who remembers to set the table and say, "Come in, you are not late, there's a place for you." He swallowed. I can do that for a while. But I don't want to decide what anyone believes. This should belong to whoever shows up. Zarnie made an exaggerated coughing sound that was at least 30% admiration and 70% performance. Then you need a charter, he said. And bylaws. And an emergency pastry plan. All 3, Pexi said dryly. File them in triplicate with a copy to the Moss. Who will officiate rites? Asked a snackter. We have rights. We love rights. There are hats. We will make rituals on purpose, Aira said before Teddy could drown. Simple ones. Borrowed ones. New ones. Human ones that are only human because a human is doing them, and snackter ones that are only snackter because a snackter is doing them, and shared ones that belong to anyone who says yes. She glanced at Teddy. He is good at saying yes. He is very good at it, Bloop put in, still hovering near the donuts with arms folded. He said yes to leaving these untouched, even when they called to us by name. They said Bloop. Zoink. We are circles. We complete you, we said, SHH holy ones. Not today, thank you for your service, Teddy told them gravely. The second service, a week later, was larger. They had to borrow benches from the language lab. The Froon tuned their chimes and invented a new shimmer that made even Zarnie's hair try to stand at attention. Aira organized a welcome team at the door with little name tags that only sometimes adhered to non-carbon structures. Teddy learned how to hold a quiet minute without counting. He learned he could cry a little without breaking anything. He learned to be hugged by species with tentacles and species with too many elbows and species that were, technically, clouds. He also learned what not to say. Do not joke about original sin with a species that reproduces by budding. Do not toss off a line about confession and then turn your back, or 3K Vathai will begin confessing to minor zoning violations into your shoulder. Do not, under any circumstances, refer to the donuts as sacraments in Zarnie's hearing, unless you enjoy essays arriving at 3 in the morning. Aira was a constant. She handled the details Teddy forgot with a grace that made him wonder if the universe had installed a subtle autopilot. She adjusted the translator settings so Mass no longer conjured gravity wells on the hollow. She pulled him aside when his jokes began to outnumber his truths. She sang. Once, when a small argument in the back threatened to become sectarian over whether the tea urn should be on the left or the right because of a historical slight between the Kvathi and the Snactor at a peace summit 5 decades prior. She touched the table with her fingertips and said, in a voice, like a lamp turning on, left or right. We will pour from both. You do not need a map to find kindness. They kissed for the first time after service 3 in a corridor that smelled faintly of basil and hot wiring. Teddy had just finished dispersing a cluster of Froon who were chime-flirting at him, which was flattering but also loud, and he turned and found Aira there, watching him like a scientist who had just witnessed an experiment turn out kinder than expected. "May I?" she asked, because consent was her language before anything else. "Please," he said, because yes was his. Her lips were cool and tasted like lemon glaze, and Teddy wondered if the universe ever got tired of its own good jokes. "Does this make us a cult?" he whispered after, dazed. "It makes us late for cleanup," she said, and kissed him again for good luck. The pushback came too. There were always going to be people, and not people, who did not like what did not belong to them yet. A faction of engineers worried that the church would waste precious chamber time on feelings when there were planetary orbits to plot. A skinny pamphlet appeared accusing the new intergalactic church of seducing the gullible with snacks. A few human messages arrived soaked in suspicion. "How dare you represent us? Who authorized you? Are you making us look soft?" Teddy read them. He sat with Gleepnax and Aira and Bloop and Zoink, and sometimes even Zarnie, and he did not pretend it was nothing. He was not trying to be right. He was trying not to be alone. It helped when Pexy showed up unannounced one evening halfway through the second song, slipped into the back, and did not leave during the quiet minute. Later, when the tea ran low, Pexy picked up the extra urn without being asked and carried it to the table like he had been waiting for someone to forget it so he could remember for them. "I logged your church in the chamber schedule as a standing committee," Pexy told Teddy afterward, pretending to dust moss off his cuffs. "We have committees for worse things." "What is our committee called?" Teddy asked, grinning. "The Committee for the Consideration of How to Be Here," Pexy said, and disappeared before they could thank him. In the 3rd month, someone asked if Teddy would officiate a naming. The couple was mixed, Kvathi and Elari. Their child, a small creature of glittering eyes and too many possibilities, had not decided which parts of their parents' biology to emphasize yet, and were, for now, comfortably ambiguous, as if the universe had left the slider unlocked. "We do not want doctrine," the Kvathi parent said. "We want a promise that we will hold them. That when we drop them, because we will, someone will catch." Teddy's throat tightened. He looked at Aira. She nodded, an orbit settling. They wrote words together that were not human or Elari or Kvathi, so much as they were precise to this tiny, wiggly person. During the ceremony, Aira sang a 2-note lullaby that made even Zarnie stare at the floor and reconsider several of his life choices. Teddy poured a little water, not to wash anything away, but to show how light refracted when you held something clear in your hands. The parents promised. The community promised. 2 Froon floated closer and chimed a soft ring the child tried to eat. It was perfect. "That was," Zarnie said afterward, hands deep in his coat pockets, "tolerable." "From you," Teddy said, "I will frame that." "It still needs a charter," Zarnie grumbled. "It has one," Aira said, and showed him a single page they had written. It was 10 lines long. It began with, "We will try to make room." It ended with, "Nobody has to eat anything to belong." Zarnie read it twice, frowned, and then folded it and put it in his pocket like it was a handkerchief he might need on a day when his eyes surprised him. The night it became official did not feel official at first. The service had gone as services go. Some singing, some quiet, a small crisis when the glucose beads rolled toward a vent, and a Froon had to act as a living filter to prevent a station maintenance report. Then the Snactor delegation stood as one. The elder clicked in a pattern that meant solemn announcement. Pexy, for once, did not sigh. The air felt slightly taller. "We request recognition," the elder said, claws weaving a formal shape. "That the new intergalactic church is not a fad. That it is a thing that will still be here when the sugar runs out. That it may have a head who is not a king but a circle maker. The head of the church who is also its lowest step." Heads turned. Faces tilted. Bloop and Zoink held hands without noticing they were doing it. Why does it need a head? Zarnie asked, but it was a soft question, a clarifying one. Because heads bow when the circle welcomes someone new, the elder said. Because someone must choose the songs when nobody can decide. Because when a fight comes, and fights always come, someone must step forward and say, we will go first, we will apologize first, we will be ridiculous first, we will be kind first. Aira looked at Teddy. The room looked at Teddy. Teddy looked at his own hands, which were not big enough to hold a galaxy, and also exactly the size of any other pair of human hands that had ever carried something that did not break. I am a freshman, he said to the chamber, startling himself with how steady he sounded. I still cannot fold the station laundry in a way that the dryer respects. I lose my student ID twice a week. The only reason I remember to eat is because Bloop reminds me that low blood sugar is a sin against the choir. It is, Bloop said gravely, but I can hold a place open, Teddy said. I can learn when to stop talking and when to tell a story because the room has forgotten that it can laugh. I can choose songs badly and let Aira fix them. If you need a head who is also a lowest step, I can be that until someone better comes along. Nobody better is coming, Aira murmured, and he was not sure whether it was reassurance or prophecy. Her hand found his. He did not look down because he did not need to see it to know it was there. Very well, Pexy said, standing. We will do this correctly, so nobody writes me later to complain about ceremony. The Council recognizes the new intergalactic church as a voluntary assembly open to all species and not species for the purpose of community, reflection, song, silence, and snacks. It recognizes Teddy of Earth as its head, styled convener, circle maker, keeper of the minute, and any additional titles that arise from beings with too much time and a label maker. Laughter untied the knot in the room's chest. Pexy lifted a hand. You will not impose doctrine. You will not interfere with existing traditions. You will keep the chamber schedule promptly, clean up crumbs, and file all necessary paperwork with my office and the Moss. Yes, Teddy said, dizzy. All the yes. And you will accept, Pexy finished, that this is going to be harder than it looks and more beautiful than you think. That is a condition of the office. I accept, Teddy said, because he had already been practicing. The crowd moved like a tide. People came to clap his shoulder in a dozen fashions. The froon chimed in a pattern that translated to a blessing, about always finding your proper frequency in company. The Snackter elder touched his shell to Teddy's forehead in a gentle click. Bloop and Zoink wept, and then pretended they had been chopping onions that did not exist on the station. Zarnie shook his hand as if measuring his grip for a future sport. Do not get weird about power, Zarnie advised. It is unbecoming. I do not even know how to spell it, Teddy said. That is a start. Zarnie hesitated, then added, like someone admitting a childhood crush to an empty freight elevator, I am proud of you. It is very irritating. Aira waited until it was quiet again. They found their corridor, the basil and the hot wiring, and for a long moment they said nothing. Teddy leaned his head against the wall and laughed once, a single astonished bark at the absurdity of existence. You are now the head of a church, Aira said. You know that means we must buy at least one filing cabinet. We will call it the Ark, he said. We will keep the markers in it. She stepped close. I am happy for you, she said, and then, softer, and I am happy for me because I get to be near you while you do this. He reached up and tucked a stray hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing the fine ridge of her brow. Her freckles brightened at his touch like little constellations saying yes in their own language. Does this mean you are the first lady of the church? He asked, unable to stop his mouth at the edge of his better judgment. It means I will correct your flyers, she said, but her grin ruined the scold. And I will sing when your voice shakes. And when you forget to eat, I will drag you to the table and make you join the circle. He pulled her into a hug. It felt like a circle that did not care about geometry rules. Thank you, he said into her hair. For all of it. For choosing the gentle thing. It is easier when you are in the room, she said. They walked back together, hand in hand, to start stacking chairs, because even in a church that had no doctrine and no altar, someone always had to stack the chairs. Gleepnax was already there, writing a dry erase timeline of future logistics. Inventory, scheduling, procurement of tea strainers that did not convert to paper airplanes when bored students looked away. Bloop and Zoink were carefully returning the donut platters to the commissary with a solemnity that bordered on liturgical. "We did not eat them," Bloop reported, as if bearing glad tidings. "This is our sacrifice. I am genuinely impressed," Teddy said. "We did lick them," Zoink confessed. "Just that one a little bit. It is fine," Aira said. "We will label it blessed by the choir." Everyone laughed, even the moss, which released a faint puff of something that smelled like rain. Later, when the chamber was empty and the lights dimmed to the blue that meant the station was pretending it was night, Teddy stood in the center of the floor and looked up. The vinework traced lazy galaxies until they forgot they were leaves. The bench rows curved in a tired, perfect embrace. He felt small and held at the same time, like a note inside a song. "Head of the church," Aira said from the doorway. It sounded ridiculous. It sounded right. "Convener," he corrected. "Circle maker." "Keeper of the minute." "Don't forget any additional titles that arise," she said. "We will make some up if the week is slow." She walked to him. They stood together in the middle of nothing and everything, and he set a timer on his slate for 1 minute, just because. They breathed. They did not try to be profound. They did not try to be anything. The minute passed, and when the soft chime came at the end, they both smiled like they had heard it for the first time. "Still counts," Aira murmured. "It still counts," Teddy said, and found that the words felt like a promise he could keep. He took her hand again. They headed for the door. There would be forms to file and schedules, to fix and Zarnie's inevitable critique of the tea temperature curve. There would be someone who needed a song and someone who needed silence. There would be donuts, carefully unsanctified, on a table near the back for anyone who wanted sweetness without a lesson attached. There would be a circle. It would be imperfect. It would be enough. "Ready?" Aira asked as the door sighed open. "No," Teddy said and grinned. "But if we say yes enough times, the universe might get confused and go along with it." "So, faith," she said. "So, faith," he agreed, and they stepped into the corridor together, where the basil smelled like morning and the wiring hummed like a song, and somewhere far off Bloop dropped a tray and declared it a miracle that nothing broke, and the station rolled forward into the next quiet minute, already counting, already generous.